Too Many Cooks is one of the craziest videos I've ever seen. This is an Adult Swim short that I think aired in the middle of the night at like midnight usually. And it involves some crazy stuff happening. It's an intro to a sitcom that perpetuates until it gets absolutely insane to the point where it's not even the sitcom. It goes from cop show to a Star Trek ripoff. It's insane. And in this video, there's so much stuff that goes on, so many things that are really confusing and just happening so quickly that it's hard to even say that there is a story here. It's so wacky and crazy and really just stupid at sometimes that it makes you think, is there even any sort of lore at all? But I like to think that there is, and I think I found out what the lore is. I found a way to connect all the dots together. Everything in this video does make sense, and I will prove it. So that is the goal of this video. We're here to make sense of this insane, crazy fucking video that Adult Swim released like 10 years ago. That's right, this is super fucking old, but we're still here to do this, and I'm still really excited to share these findings with you guys and explain what's going on in this video. So in this video, there's a lot of questions. There's so many questions. The main question that we're going to be asking is, who is this guy?
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
Because at a certain point in this video, it goes from being about an intro to being about a murderer who shows up in the backgrounds and slowly starts appearing more often and then kills like half the cast. And there's this really cool chase sequence where we follow him through the halls as he chases after Katie. And it's such a cool, well done scene, and everything is so perfect, and it's hilarious. Not necessarily the Katie part, but what happens immediately afterwards is pretty fucking funny. Either way, this man goes on a killing spree and kills basically everyone you see for a really long time, and then takes over the show and eats the entire cast in front of the camera, smiling, and he's all happy. So, you know, this gets really crazy. This gets absolutely insane. And then it turns into a Star Trek show where he is the main villain. Then it becomes a doctor drama. Then everything just goes completely insane. And Smarf, the weird little orange cat guy, tries to stop it, but nobody can stop it. Nobody can end this thing, except for the video ending, because it's only that's the end of the short. Should we keep that? Do we do a retake? I think we're good. So, with the one question of who is this guy and how does he connect to everything else, that's technically two questions. We can start to piece together the lore of this weird ass short. And I think the first place to start is the appearances.
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
He first appears like 1 minute into the video, and you see him standing behind a baby. But he's kind of lurking around, you know, he's not necessarily really doing anything yet. He's just kind of standing there. And in his next appearance, we see him behind some chefs, looking at probably the set, which could mean one of two things. Either this guy is a director on this show, maybe even the one who created the show, and he's checking these props to see if they're up to code, and they just happen to catch him in the background because it's a poorly made show. Or the alternative is that he is a character in the show. He's an actor on the show, and he is part of it with all these other actors. His next appearance is in an office building, which is honestly a really weird switch to make, but it's him walking in the background with a bunch of papers in his hands, and he doesn't look very happy. He looks like he's a little upset, and he's walking through the background. And it's hard to tell whether those are props or not. The next time we see him is again in the office, hiding behind a cubicle. And we can see that he's very unhappy right now. He is not having the best time. And his next appearance is right at the intro wrap-up, when everyone is going to sit down and take the final picture for the intro. He is there in the background on the stairs, which, again, it either means that he's a person there working on the show that keeps getting in these shots, or he's an actor on the show with all these other people. And I think that it is more likely that he is an actor on the show with these people, and I'll explain why in a bit. I will, but we're not going to touch on that quite yet because we have a lot to talk about. So his next appearance actually takes a bit. There's a good minute where he's just not there, while the table spins around and introduces new character after new character. And his next appearance doesn't show up until it transforms into a cop drama. Then you can see him in the background staring at the police lady, and also in the background staring at the policeman. And this time around, he's getting pretty creepy, you know? He's in these backgrounds and he's not looking okay, which makes me think that he's not part of this show anymore. He probably got fired and is sneaking onto set, but I don't have a lot of proof to prove that yet, because we still have to talk about the rest of his appearances. And from this point on, he starts getting a lot more aggressive, showing up in the animated cartoon G.I. Joe series with a hatchet in his hand. You know, he's ready to kill people. That's not a hatchet. That's not a hatchet. That's a machete. And then his next appearance is him murdering people. And from this point on, he's kind of there throughout the entire short, just killing everyone and taking them out one by one. And then eventually, after he kills enough people, he starts to replace them, and glitchy text goes over him as he replaces every single person on the show and then eats them at a table. And then the robot cat explodes, etc., etc. For now, that's the main thing we're gonna focus on. We're gonna focus on that timeline. How did he get from acting on the show to murdering these people and eating them on a table? We're gonna ignore all the crazy shit that happens in between, like the people turning into, superheroes, and the weird glitchy people just standing in corners staring at walls, and the yellow text in front of them floating in front of them and giving away their position. We're ignoring that for now. And there's a reason we're ignoring that. So let's just look at this through a lens of reality. How did he get from point A to point B?
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
So he starts off as an actor on the show. He comes in around the second season, we'll say, because around the first minute mark, they sit down on the couch and it acts like it's going to end the intro, but then it just keeps going. And my thought is that that is the original intro's ending. That's how it goes. That's the original intro for like a good season or two. And then they start introducing more characters, they start getting more actors on the show, and that is when this guy shows up. So either he got hired as an actor at this point, or he was a director up until this point and started acting in the backgrounds. Either way, regardless, we start seeing him in the backgrounds, and he gradually gets more and more upset. You can tell by the end of the outro that he is not having a good time. He is very angry at this cast and crew, and he doesn't appreciate the show anymore. So he goes missing for a while, and we don't actually see him until the show becomes a cop drama, where it's so warped from its original state that he shows back up to spite murder everyone. And if we start to look at it that way, it does make a lot more sense. You know, this guy is angry with where the show has been taken, so he goes and kills all these people and then replaces them in the show. He's putting the show back to what it originally was in his mind, what he wants it to be. And obviously this guy's a lunatic if he's murdering all these people and, eating people at a table and like he's cool with it or whatever. But just because he's insane doesn't mean he doesn't have a motive. He didn't like where the show was going. He didn't like how many people were in the show. He didn't like how many cooks were there. There was too many cooks. And if you look at the victims, it makes sense. It really does make sense. We got rich people inside of a mansion. Listen, this mansion is massive, alright? It's so big that we get an outside shot of it 4 times over. And the first people he kills are the rich people inside the mansion. You can tell that they are rich because of their attire and the place that they're in. And Dan Trandaflow, I think is his name, I would assume that this is the rich people's child, He's just sitting there on the tennis court, playing tennis. And that makes me think that he is part of this rich family. He's part of the rich family that probably funds this show, maybe the network that owns this show. And the next people he kills are the cast and crew. He's going for specific people. This isn't just him going for random people. You can see Elena, Amy, and Katie in this room fighting each other with pillows, implying that they are actors. But then, when Elena Nord gets pulled away, she's in the back rooms. This is backstage after they were done acting. He goes in and kills all 3 of these actors. And Katie glitches out, and we'll touch on that later, but the point is, he hunts these people down and murders them. And the next people he murders also actors on the show, actors that we saw earlier, actually. We see Katie Garalt earlier in this show. Will Dove is actually a returning actor. We see him as the Peeping Tom earlier before he gets his head chopped off. So that implies that these are actors from the previous show, like actors that have been in the seasons along with this crazy person. And the next person he kills is the detective. He's not going for random people who work on this show. He's going for specific people. Derek Huffmaster is the detective trying to figure out his case, and he murders him. And then we see him murder basically everyone else on the cast and crew and take over the show for himself. And what I believe that is him going to the studio and killing this cast and crew, and then broadcasting it live, recording an episode of his liking to post to the public. And then he gets blown up by Smarf, and we're not going to talk about what that means yet, because that is technically the end of his story. He becomes the main villain in these weird Star Trek episodes, but other than that, he doesn't actually show up again. He gets blown up by Smarf, and that's the end of it. Who is this mystery man? Who's the murder man? Who is the guy with the machete? He is an actor on the show, a begrudged actor that got kicked off of the show and murdered his entire cast and crew, and everyone trying to find out who did the crimes so that he can broadcast his version of the show. And with that comes the answer of who are the victims. They are the cast and crew. They are the people that used to work on this show with him, and they're the people trying to stop him from doing these crimes. And now it's time to start talking about the meta stuff. Time to start talking about the weird, insane bullshit that goes on in this video.
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
So, first of all, we're seeing this through the lens of it being an intro. Does that mean that this is the intro and it's a 10-minute long intro for a show? I believe that it is not. I think that this is metaphorical because we see multiple times the intro is like ending. It's supposed to end, but then it just keeps going perpetually. And we see this happen throughout the place where it will end an intro and immediately go into another one. And I believe that this is the seasons progressing. This isn't necessarily an intro that's perpetuating for that long, because we see returning characters like Justin Scott, who are there literally the entire time, throughout the entire show. Justin Scott is there, which implies that them introducing him multiple times is multiple intros going on, you know? This isn't just one intro. This is the progression of intros. The spinning table intro, the cop intro, the G.I. Joe intro, they're all separate. These are all separate seasons. And I believe the reason that the murder guy gets so mad about this is because of the drastic changes to the show, you know? It starts off as a family drama with a little bit too many characters. Then it starts becoming a mess where there's too many people in the house. And now it's gotten to the point where it's not even about a house, it's about a cop show, it's about G.I. Joe, it's about America. And it shifts entirely from what it was as rich people take it over, you know? Because I do believe that when we get to the mansion, that isn't necessarily a show. I feel like if it is a show, it's the show warping so far into the rich people era that it becomes one of those mansion shows, like the shows where you see a rich people walking around, like Corey in the House and stuff. And that is so far removed from what the original one was that it makes sense that they would be upset about. And then it changes into a sorority house, I think, for like a little bit, which is just insane. And then it goes back to a sitcom house show when he takes over, which is why I think that he's bringing it back to the original state, you know? He's bringing it back to what he wanted. He brought all these people back with these yellow names to this place, but they're just stuck standing still because they're posed the way that he wants them to be posed, you know? I believe that these people are dead right now. Ken DeLozier is in the background right here. He is the main actor of the first season, you know? He's the dad sitting down at the intro, and he is stuck there standing with his hand on the railing, stuck, frozen in time. And I believe that he is dead in this point in time. His dead body is probably just there on the stairs, but in the murder man's eyes, he sees this as the perfect setup, you know? These people are standing in the right position, posed up the way that they're supposed to be, but they're just dead on the ground, which would explain so much. That would explain why Katie is terrified as she's running past these people, and James White, his head is in the fridge. He's dead. He's a dead guy right there, and they murdered him. And that also explains why he's running past all these people, you know? Murder Man just runs past John, and he is 100% dead in that robot suit. He is not alive. Eugene Jackson, he's totally dead right there. The guy walking in the background is probably not walking around at all. He's most likely dead, laid out. But in his mind, in the murder guy's mind, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do, which means that he must have been crew. He must have been a cameraman. But either way, he finds Katie, murders her. Then we find the two actors turning into superheroes slowly. And it's pretty ridiculous, you know? It's pretty stupid, them spinning around in a circle for way too long and then just kind of dying because they didn't know what they were doing. And that, in my eyes, is the Murder Man seeing them as trying to be heroes, you know? They went in and tried to stop him. They tried to, you know, murder him so that he couldn't murder them, but they didn't stand a chance, and they just died instantly. Especially the one guy who didn't even get a superhero outfit. His superhero outfit is an eye mask and a cape. That's it. Because he tried to be a hero, but he failed so bad. And then, you know, the detective shows up and starts investigating the people that tried to be heroes, and he just kills them right then and there. Because he was probably on the spot, being questioned by this detective. Then we see him go on to kill more cast and crew, and then just replace them on the show, creating a show that he wants, you know? And it makes sense that it would be this deranged if it is him, you know, murdering this entire cast and replacing them. It would be deranged. Him being locked in a studio for like a night before the police even know, just murdering the entire cast and crew and filming as much as he can, and then posting it live. I said posting, it's TV. Broadcasting it live to thousands and thousands of people, that would ruin the show. And I think that's his end goal right now, is to take out this show's reputation. He wants to tank it because it's going on for too long. It's a Simpsons situation. It's a Prince of Bel-Air type of situation where it just goes on for way too long and everyone's like, oh, I don't want to watch this. And that's subjective, you know? I don't want to say anything about anything specific, you know? I have no shade towards Prince of Bel-Air. But just one of those sitcoms that goes on for way too long. And he wanted to put an end to it, and the only way that he knew how was to murder everybody and broadcast it live. And I do believe that these names are hallucinations because he knows these people as the actors. You know, this guy is insane. He sees these people as the actors because he is one of the actors alongside them. And I believe I know which actor he is.
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
So, at the end of this short, after all the Star Trek stuff, after all the hospital stuff, after all the insane Smurf stuff, there's an actual end credits scene. And during that, you see everyone sit down at the couch, and right before he's ready to sit down, the red shirt guy gets their picture taken and turns into the one guy, the murder guy. That's him. That's him right there. And I believe that that is him. I think that that version of him was his original state. He used to be an actor on this show during the 3rd season. Because this was his final season on this show. This was when he became the Murder Man. This was when he became the monster. Up until this point, the monster version of him was just watching, you know? It was hiding in the background, not really that apparent, staring at him and everyone else as they sat down to end this show, or to start this show, my bad, it's an intro. But as he goes to sit down, you can see the Murder Man is staring at him. He's upset at himself for still acting on this show, you know? He is critiquing himself, and he can see the angry, older version of himself that will eventually go insane and attack everyone. And that's why when he does attack those people, he does look like that, because his version of himself that is that was staring at him the whole time and watching him as he acted on this show that he hated. Which makes me think that he didn't technically leave the show until the G.I. Joe era. He begrudgingly stayed on the show. He stayed with it. and he was mad at himself for doing that. So his version of himself that he sees is the angry murder version because it's slowly taking over. And then by the time he does start murdering these people, that is just what he looks like, you know? He let himself go. Ken DeLozier isn't a real person anymore. It's just him. And that also explains why he is the one, Ken DeLozier is the one in the doctor's scene, in the bed dying from intronitis. Which I believe just means that he has been through way too many sitcom intros. He's done it all, you know? He got sick from doing this show. And it wasn't intronitis, of course, you know. It was probably a different disease, but the hallucinations began there, I think. This was technically the middle of the timeline. He begins working at the show, and this was the point where he quit the show. The point where he had a doctor tell him, you are getting sick from doing all these intros, from doing all these shows that you're doing. And that signifies him actually quitting the show. And right after that is when the show starts to get so insane that it just falls apart, and Smarf tries to end it all. And I believe that is the show falling apart without him in his eyes, you know? He's looking at the show and he sees all his fellow actors screaming in pain because they don't want to be there. He didn't want to be there, and he got out, but they're still stuck. So he has this perpetual nightmare of all of these actors trying to stop it but being incapable of it. So he goes back and murders all these people to put them out of their misery. And it could even be not to put them out of their misery, but to get rid of the people in charge, you know, the people, the main people that he doesn't care about, that don't show up at the end when all these texts are glitching and you can see the people above the text. All the people he murdered are not there. The people that are floating above these names are the original cast and crew, the people that get introduced in the beginning. It's the wife, the weird uncle, we see the little girl, and the old lady who was holding the baby. These are the people that he cares about, and he sees them on this show struggling and hating it and not wanting to be there, to the point where Smarf is bleeding out, you know, he is fucked up. And the show is literally killing these people. It's killing them, which is why he wants to put an end to it. He wants to stop it, because in his eyes, he sees this as torture. He doesn't see this as a normal show like everyone else does. So him going around and murdering all of these people is his way of showing mercy, kind of like sparing them. And the significance of him being blown up by Smarf is the show trying to save itself. That's the show trying to rebrand and trying to branch out into something new, to move on from the tragedy that was the broadcast of all of the people dying and all that. So they kill him, which is probably them actually killing him, you know. I would assume that that is the police barging in and shooting him, but they pretended that it was Smarf to like kind of make up for it and play it off for the show. And then the show drastically turns from what it was, you know. It changes completely into a Star Trek show about cooks versus broth.
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
Broth stands for Beast Rebels of the Hellscape, and every single enemy we see in this Star Trek-esque show is the murder guy. They turned him into the main villain to play off these murders and act like it was all good, which was probably in terrible taste. Or maybe this is before that in the timeline. Listen, this is still kind of up in the air at this point in time. I don't know whether or not this takes place before he murders everybody or after, but the point is the show drastically changes and he becomes the main villain. He is the one that is hordes of himself just marching for the main enemy. He is the one on the screen when the guys look at who the villain is. He's the one whose head is attached to the enemy spaceship, literally shooting lasers at the good guys. And they've warped him into the bad guy, and I think he sees himself as the bad guy at this point in the show, you know. These are still technically his hallucinations, but he is playing the bad guy right now because he's still working on this show, even though it's so terrible and so warped from what it was. If this takes place before his death, If this takes place afterwards, that would imply that they turned him into the villain after the murder spree. But if I'm being honest, I think the murder spree is the end. That was the final part, and this part goes before that in the timeline, where this was the final iteration of the show before he murdered everyone, because it was so different from what it was. And then it cuts to the doctor giving him his diagnosis for intronitis, and then it cuts to the show becoming a complete mess and everyone trying to have it end, like trying to end the show and never being able to break out of the cycle, which is why he goes back and murders everyone. It's before that in the timeline that he goes out and murders all these people. The murders are the final part of this story. They're the final piece in the puzzle. And all of these things are hallucinations. You know, he sees these people getting intronitis and being stuck in this perpetual state of working on this show because they can never leave. You know, they're contracted in. They have to work on this show until it ends, and they know that they're stuck there, and he knows that they're stuck there. And it's just so far from what it was originally that none of them want to be there. Everyone's having a terrible time, and it's just a show going on for way too long. And it's the main actor of this show's revenge story. It's him getting revenge on this casting crew that kept the show going for way too long. The millionaires that spent their money to keep this show going. The people that acted on this show and perpetuated it, the newer ones. And the older ones that tried to stop him from doing this. The ones that tried to stop him from ending this show. Which explains why they became superheroes and why he killed them. And he kills the detective trying to figure out who did it all. So in conclusion, this is a story about a murderer going back for vengeance. He's trying to get revenge for what these people did to him, which was completely warp what his reality was. He has intronitis. He was so used to being on this show that when he wasn't, he lost it. And when these people were still on the show, looking like they were having fun but not having fun at all, he lost it even more. It's not just an insane video that Adult Swim released 10 years ago. This is a story about a creator that lost his mind because his creation was warped beyond recognition, and everyone that was there started to have a little bit less fun with it.
It takes a lot to make a stew.
A pinch of salt and laughter too.
So with that wraps up this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, but I think we wrapped this up pretty well. There was like one thing we didn't touch on. Katie freezes, and we see it happen. Katie is like the one person that freezes during this intro thing and isn't completely frozen, because we can see this guy walk around. You know, he crawls out from under the bed and starts creeping up on her during this intro, and she sees him and breaks out of it, glitching out and running away. And what I believe that is him killing them mid-shoot. You know, this is him having a hallucination where she's like stuck in the intro in his eyes, you know. He's like, if I just sneak up on her, I can kill her and get her during this intro. But she's like frozen for the intro, waiting for the guy to stop filming, and she sees the guy run away and like in the camera reflection or something sees him and then runs away. But in his perspective, everything is frozen, and she starts to glitch out because she's not supposed to do that, and she breaks out of the system, getting away from him. And that's the explanation of the glitch in my eyes. I believe everything that we're seeing when the murder man runs around murdering people is from his perspective, you know? He sees the mansion as an intro to the show. Whether or not it is, he sees it as an intro to the show. And the guy walking in the background, that very well could be one of the people murdering people with him. Maybe he has other actors from the show joining him on this journey. And that's just a few of the loose ends that I wanted to touch on. If there's any others that you guys see or that you want to point out, let me know and I will touch on those as well. But for now, that's the end of this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you thought this theory was pretty cool, because I did. And we're gonna do a lot more theories soon. There's gonna be a lot more Adult Swim theories. Look forward to a theory on the Eric Andre show. That's right, the Eric Andre theory is coming out in 2026, and I'm so excited for it. Don't even at me. It's gonna be so cool, and I'm gonna try to get it out first thing 2026, but we'll see what happens. Either way, that's the end. We'll see you guys later. Bye. Like and subscribe, please. This took so long, please. I literally, editing me, put it up. I got a notebook filled with shit, research that I did on this video just to get this done, alright? So you have to like and subscribe. You have to. He is not having the best time. A little angry, a little angry. Jesus Christ, dude. We gotta edit that out. No way.